We thought it was a tremendous idea. So what we do is propose that for folks who are on food stamps, part, not all, part of their benefits come in the actual sort of, and I don't want to steal somebody's copyright, but a Blue Apron type program where you actually receive the food instead of receive the cash. It lowers the cost to us because we can buy prices at wholesale whereas they have to buy it at retail. It also makes sure that they're getting nutritious food. So we're pretty excited about that. That's a tremendous cost savings.
Donald Trump's latest genius idea, cutting out half of the cash benefits that most recipients of SNAP benefits, once commonly known as food stamps, receive, and replacing the funds with a box of canned vegetables, cereal, and other non-perishable foods, called America's Harvest Box, despite the fact that it would have zero freshly harvested food. The administration claims the box will somehow improve beneficiaries' nutrition and at the same time slash costs to the tune of $12 billion a year. Joining me now is Tom Colicchio, food policy activist, chef, and owner of Crafted Hospitality. And on the phone with us is Bishop William Barber, president of Repairers of the Breach. And Tom, I'll come to you first. Their idea is to essentially slash the benefits to SNAP in half, essentially. In 2019, it would be a $17.2 billion program. In 2019, they would slash $213.5 billion. They would add work requirements, they would limit eligibility, they would end a nutrition education program, and then they would add costs by having to deliver this box of unperishable food. Right. In your view, is this a good idea?
No, this is just an assault on the poor. You know, this Trump administration, they have this obsession with all things Russia. This is like 1960 Soviet era, policy. The idea that these small government Republicans are going to actually replace a public-private partnership, free market enterprise with a bureaucracy that is somehow going to package 16 million meals or 16 million boxes per month and save money just doesn't make sense at all.
And the idea that poor people will lose the right to choose what they eat, that essentially a big government bureaucrat, that's really big government, will choose the food you eat and you don't have a choice. You get this box.
Right. Look what they did with Michelle Obama when she suggests that maybe we should eat more nutritious foods for school lunch.
Exactly.
And so, no, this just smacks with hypocrisy.
It's amazing, Bishop Barber, because the part of this seems to be rooted in the perception that people who are struggling are mostly non-white and that they are leeching off the system, sitting around driving a Cadillac and eating lobster and steak is what fills up my mentions whenever we talk about the poor. But the fact is, the Washington Post just put out statistics from the census that 17% of the people who would be impacted by this policy change are rural Americans and only 13% are urban.
Yeah, and the majority are white and women. I mean, when you look at poverty in this country, there are 8 million more poor white people than there are African Americans, and the majority of these people live in the very states where many of these politicians get elected by voter suppression and other racial ways. The Southern strategy, I've mentioned a lot of times on this phone, part of the Southern strategy began in the 1968 in order to control the Congress and try to control the presidency was to teach that somehow entitlements and programs were black and brown people getting things that was hurting white people. And so programs were racialized. And I was thinking, Joe, this was a triple threat. It's like a 19th century, ghost of days past. This man with, he had a cross on his forehead doing Lent. This is on Wednesday, for Ash Wednesday. And none of these policies line up with Christ. They're talking about health care, cutting millions of people, food now to millions of people, and even heat to 7 million people. They're talking about taking it. It's a triple threat and a direct attack on the poor and the working poor.
It's amazing, Tom, because you're not talking about a lot of money per person. SNAP benefits are only about $125 a month, $126 a month, $254 a household. 94% of the funding for this program goes right to benefits that get spent at your local grocery store, that get spent in Walmart. Through the freedom of choice, people spend 100% of their benefits. You can't keep any of it. You have to spend it, and that means you're buying food from food manufacturers. How can Republicans interpret that as a bad idea? Doesn't it help the economy?
Of course it helps the economy. And also, there are great programs like the Double Up program where if you're a SNAP recipient and you're shopping in a farmer's market, you're actually getting double the amount of your benefit. That money goes directly to farmers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so there's also a multiplier effect. For every dollar spent through the SNAP system, it actually creates about $1.75 of economic activity.
Yeah.
So it's actually great for communities as well. So no, we need, let's really start talking about nutrition, because that's really the crux of this here. Children, when they go to school, if they have a proper breakfast, they actually can learn. We're talking about seniors. We're talking about people with disabilities. This is the way they actually feed themselves. We're also talking about 1.5 million veterans who protected this country, who are struggling to feed themselves because they come home with PTSD and they're really struggling to find work. We're also talking about active military that this will hurt as well because they're on SNAP as well.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about the working poor. We're not talking about people who are looking for a handout. We're talking about children, seniors, people with disabilities, and people that are working.
Working minimum wage or at Walmart.
Exactly. And so this is just a terrible idea. We actually need to increase the benefits of SNAP so people can actually afford healthy food.
Yeah.
Because right now we have about $200 billion of healthcare costs that are associated with poor diet because people can't afford nutrition.
Yeah.
They can afford calories, but they can't afford nutrition.
That's an excellent point. And Bishop Barber, you work a lot in the rural communities in North Carolina. I mean, what happens if they're also cutting the post office and want to cut that back? What happens if someone's box doesn't get delivered? What happens if it's out in the rain and gets wet? What happens if the children in the household are allergic to what's in the box? Where is the church? Where is the white evangelical church to say that this is cruelty? And it's not just cruelty they think it's cruelty to black and brown people, but you personally know that this is also the white rural poor.
Well, all over the South and other places, the homeless, whether it's in Seattle, Washington, where there are homeless people in the harbor, or whether it's in Alabama, whether it's in North Carolina. And I think the so-called evangelicals are where they normally are. They're not with Jesus. They are not with the Jesus who talked about good news to the poor. They are not with the scriptures that talked about how we should not be attacking the poor. And I do want to say this is not just about the work, but it's about the poor. And you have to say the poor because people suggest that people are not working poor and somehow they're just lazy. No, people are trapped in systemic poverty. And what we at the moral issue, Joe, here is we've got 14 million poor children, for instance, in the country. You're talking about an administration that will give trillions of greedy tax welfare to the greedy. They will give billions to banks and say banks are too big to fail and give them billions, and then put billions in a wall, but then they want to give boxes to the poor and to the working poor. I mean, it's so immoral. It's a contradiction to our scriptures, a contradiction to our Constitution, the establishment of justice, and the promotion of the general welfare. But then, Joy, there's another thing, lastly, and I want to say this deeply from a moral perspective, and that is the question before America. How much have you had to dehumanize yourself in order to use power in such ways to dehumanize others? And Americans have to stand up and say, we're not going to allow this to happen in our name, with our government, with our democracy.
Yeah, indeed. We are reminded that when Jesus fed the multitudes, he gave them fresh fish.
Yeah, and fresh bread.
Amen. Tom Colicchio, Bishop William Barber, thank you both very much. And coming up at the top of the hour, Donald Trump's national security advisor just admitted that Russian interference is now beyond dispute. Well, that's special. More on that at noon. But up next, more AM Joy.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.